What's up, Dragon Brood? With Murders at Karlov Manor about to release, I wanted to talk about some cards that are just unloved, underappreciated, and honestly, downright underrated. So let's get into it and talk about 8 cards from this set that you're probably not paying that much attention to, and maybe you should be. As a reminder, this video is brought to you by the MTG Ambassador Program, and there's going to be a link down below that you should check out so you can go and pre-order from your local store all of this great Murders at Karlov Manor stuff we're going to be talking about today. So let's get into it. All right, so the first card I want to talk about is Drag the Canal. And the main reason this is on my underrated list is I don't see many people talking about this when you get so much stuff for just 2 mana. Like, you get to make a token, you get to, well, technically 2 tokens, because one of them is a clue token you get from investigating as well. You could surveil and you can gain 2 life. Now, admittedly, that does require a creature having to go to the graveyard, but there's a billion ways for that to happen, even just through combat. And black obviously kills a lot of things, so you just attach a 2-mana rider onto it and get a bunch of other stuff. Like, this feels really good. Like, even if just at instant speed you need to make a blocker for some reason, like, you could do that too. Like, this card has to be playable, and I don't see that many people talking about it, but it seems like a pretty sweet card. Next up, I have Kellen Inquisitive Prodigy. First, it's just kind of interesting that we're getting Kellen in every set, so we're just like following the adventures of this guy. But I do like the idea that the adventure side lets you play an extra land and investigates, which is cool. So you get to set up a card draw for later, which is awesome. But then also, it's just a good sizable body. It does fly, it has vigilance, so you can attack and block with it. If it connects, you could destroy some artifacts. But if you destroy one of your own, you just get to draw, so you don't even have to spend the mana on those clues. Like, this card has to get a little more hype, right? Now, maybe the issue here is that blue and green as a color combination isn't really, like, leading a bunch of stuff, or maybe in some decks not really leading the way you would want to make use of this, but there is already a blue-green deck that leans on artifacts in Standard that maybe 2 of these could be slotted in, and then there you go. So yeah, this card might have a home already, and we just haven't noticed. All right, next on my list is Outrageous Robbery. This one kind of surprised me, and I think I overlooked it the first time I was going over the cards in the set, but when I came back and thought about it, we already have effects like this that people enjoy. Now, admittedly, those aren't often the most powerful things, but here's the thing. We get to do this at instant speed, right? And it's scalable, so late in the game, it's almost like a fancy mill card, only it exiles the things and they don't even go to their graveyard. But then you get to play those for the rest of the game, effectively. This has to have some upside. Now, I wouldn't put a bunch of these into a deck, obviously, but even just playing like 2 copies in some slower control decks or some type of ramp builds where we already have all the mana, you just get to go ham and play like a third of your opponent's deck if you want to. Like, this seems really cool. And there's probably some insidious things you can do in Commander if I were guessing, but yeah, this one actually seems pretty interesting, and I could see this long-term being something a lot of people are seeking out. Like, this one's really cool from a design perspective, and I have a feeling I'm going to lose to it at some point by just getting milled out. All right, 10th District Hero. I find this one to be kind of amusing, right? It fits right into all of the mono-white humans, the human Boros decks, whatever, so this can fit into a lot of places very easy. Super easy to cast. It's a 2/3 for 2, which is nice because it's not the standard 2/2, and it's pretty easy to turn this into a 4/4, which is awesome. And then you don't even have to do it at sorcery speed, which is great. And then if you do turn it to the full size 5/5, then all your other stuff has indestructible, obviously, until they deal with this. But that's great. I like a lot of what this card does. And it's the type of card you kind of have to be aware of when it's on the battlefield because it'll just surprise you and then things don't go your way during a combat. But yeah, this one, really cool. And it's got some nice, like, new age looking kind of classic art with like the whole hat, trench coat, whatever. I'm into it. There's a lot in this card to like, honestly. And this one just feels like a lot of fun. All right, next up, World Souls Rage. World Souls Rage. Why is that so difficult to say? Anyway, you won't be saying too much, or at least your opponents won't, once you hit them with the big X spell. Like, this is great because there are some ramp effects you might want that can get you all this extra mana. Now you have somewhere to spend it. Even if you just want to finish off a creature or a planeswalker, it is at sorcery speed, but that's fine. It's basically a super fancy fireball. But the upside of this is that you get to put a lot of extra lands into play. Pretty much, however much you spend, you can put that many from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. This is actually super sweet. Like, Imagine even just doing this early on with like a couple of cards that are like sending stuff to your graveyard. You're okay, I'm going to kill that creature for 4. All right, cool. Now I put 4 more lands onto the battlefield, and now I can cast anything in the deck or multiple things starting the following turn. Or if your opponent's been milling you and you just load up your battlefield. And there's creature lands potentially that come into the battlefield there. Because it doesn't even say just like basics, it just says lands. So this card's actually really surprising. And it's any target. We've had a lot of things that have been limited to just planeswalkers or just creatures or whatever, the case may be. But this literally says any target. So yeah, there's a lot here you can do. And the aggro decks having access to something like this could be pretty interesting. Now, does it fit most aggro lists? Probably not. It's going to go into more mid-rangey or ramp things, but it's definitely a card you're going to have to keep on your radar so you don't randomly lose to it when you tap out. All right, this next one's one I've been championing since I saw it previewed, and that's Buic Investigator. Now, it's a 3-mana 2/4 with Flying and Vigilance, which is super good, right? Just on stats, you get a sizable creature, big toughness, you get 2 quality abilities. But then additionally, if one of your opponents has more cards than you during your upkeep, then you just get to investigate. So then now you have the opportunity to draw cards. Like, I love what this does for decks because it's a really problematic creature for even, say, mono red to punch through, being a 4 toughness. But then you also get access to more cards potentially in other matchups like the mid-rangey things or Azorius control or anything like that. So it gives you a chance to catch up or even stay competitive in situations where otherwise creature decks might lack. Also, it's an angel. Now, does that mean a whole lot? I don't know, but angels have been kind of wanting one more relevant creature with some other useful ability, and this might be the one. Even even better here is that the card actually only requires 1 colored mana in its cost, which means it's splashable into a lot of things. So even if you're not necessarily playing angels, it could go into some other creature deck that either wants flyers or the ability to get more cards without sacrificing those slots that would otherwise be creatures. Next on the list is Vanar Evolved Enigma. Now, this is a 4-mana 3/4, so it's not super exciting on its face, but the fact that you can just take a card from your hand and turn it into a 2/2 is great, or you can just put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you have. Now, the fun thing here is that you could play this with artifact creatures or even stuff that makes mites, because those happen to be artifact creatures. So you could do some really fun stuff with that. But additionally, this actually just lets you never have dead cards later in the game, right? Like, let's say you draw lands you don't need anymore. Well, you just take a card from your hand and you cloak it and it's a 2/2. Now, it never becomes anything else, but because you can put counters on everything, then maybe. There also could be some weird world where this actually gets played alongside stuff with like Phyrexians and that whole thing. So like maybe, but I do like what this card does. It kind of opens up a different type of design space and deck building that could be really cool. And if you're already playing a deck that cares about having all the cloaked / face down / morphed things, this could fit perfectly for that, which means this card actually has some value for older decks that are playing with some of those older mechanics and not just stuff from Murders at Karlov Manor. So yeah, this one's actually surprisingly interesting. I don't know if it'll be a top tier competitive card. If I had to guess, probably not. But I do think it can go into some really fun decks and lead to some very cool mid-rangey things that you can still play on the ladder at the very least. And interestingly, the last card on my list is Aurelia's Vindicator, which happens to be another angel. A 4/2 angel with ward and flying and lifelink, so you're getting a pile of great abilities and a 4-power creature. Now, only 2 toughness, but it does have ward too, which is great. But that's not even the real reason we like this card. The fact that you can play it face down, and then the disguise cost, while expensive, because it's 4 and X, does let you actually save some of your creatures, because there are a lot of sweepers, and those have been things that people have complained about and have been problems, but think about this. There's some situations later in the game where you have a couple of things out there and maybe you've got 6, 7 mana. Well, now you have the situation that if your opponent, let's say we're going to Sunfall or Farewell, you can turn this face up and then actually exile X creatures from your graveyard or from the battlefield. And then when this leaves, those come back into play. Basically meaning that you can save the other creatures you have on the battlefield already if you want. This goes away and then you get those right back. And now you're ready to keep fighting after that sweeper. Or, if there's just a bunch of stuff in your graveyard, set it up to where you flip this up, this dies, you get those 3 things out of your graveyard into play, and now you're ready to fight with them next turn. right? There's some really cool stuff you can do with this. Now, how often are those things going to happen? Are those Magic Christmas Land scenarios? Maybe to some extent, but even just one or two in a deck could still be really powerful because at the very least, this card is still just a 4 power flyer with lifelink and ward for 4 mana. So that can't be terrible. It's one of those fun cards that's actually on its face very good, actually turns face down. So like on its face and then not on its face. But you know what I'm saying. Like regularly it's good, but with its other ability, it's even better. And those cards are versatile and you like to have those in your deck. So would not be surprised if you see a couple of these pop up somewhere along the way. Now with a set like Murders at Karlov Manor, there are a ton of new abilities and a ton of new strategies that are going to get unlocked. And I'm sure there's things you're looking at right now saying, why did you not talk about this card? Well, if you think I should, let me know. Maybe we'll include them in a video or build a deck around them. Because I'm sure there's got to be a ton of things in the set that people are hyped about that I didn't even mention. But I also have my favorite cards in the set. If you want to see that, check out this next video.